Hello, this is your host, Christina from Savvy Radio. Thank you for joining us for our Heartbeat of the World video series, where we're bringing you some of the top experts around the globe to talk about some of the greatest challenges facing our country and the world. Our guest today is Dr. Amir Baluch. He is a successful anesthesiologist and comes from a medical family. He saw firsthand his father, despite his success as a doctor, still struggling to manage his finances. Amir learned early on a career in medicine is not a golden ticket to economic security. He was determined to get his financial education and use the same principles that led him to become a successful doctor to become a successful investor. Today he shares that journey and how you too can build your own successful financial portfolio. Find out more at baluchbulletin.com. That is BALUCH bulletin.com. Hi, Amir. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. I'm so happy to have you out here today. You are a wonderful anesthesiologist. You've also helped business owners and people learn about how to bring finances and get better about their finances. But on top of all of that, you've also gotten to the wonderful world of real estate and built a multi-million-dollar real estate transaction business. So before we go to all of that yummy details, share with our audience a little bit about what brought you to where you are today, becoming a successful anesthesiologist in Dallas, Texas, to also building a thriving real estate business. How did that all work out for you?
Well, when I was growing up, my dad was a major influence on me. He was an internal medicine doctor. And so just see him go to clinics and come back happy that he could help his patients. I was thinking, hey, why don't I be a doctor? And of course, all my teachers loved the idea. So they kind of pushed me along that way. It was kind of interesting. While I was going through medical school, internal medicine wasn't what I thought it was. So I kind of, veered a little bit close to anesthesia, where things are a little bit more acute and a little bit more intense, which actually I like, a little bit more hands-on. And I had some great mentors along the way. The chairman of Texas Tech Anesthesia, Alan Kay, at the time, he was a big mentor for me, and he kind of taught me the values and what to look for in medicine and how to balance my priorities. But then as I was going through my training, I started to become more interested in finances, because now it was time to save. I started making money, and I realized my dad hadn't made much money or saved as much money at all, even though he was a doctor. And, I'd see him spending a lot of money, but not keeping it or investing it. So while I was researching, how most people become multimillionaires, I ran across a very interesting statistic. It said that 80% of multimillionaires gain their wealth mainly through real estate investing. And so a light went off in my head. I had to read that statistic a few times. I'm like, is this really what's going on? So even at the age of 21, I started looking into real estate, and just one thing led to another. And we started growing from there. I didn't grow my brokerage or the commercial real estate brokerage, or started doing private syndications until just a few years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago. But that's the initial way of how I got started in all this.
This is fascinating to me, because I've had a couple of friends. One friend back in my 20s, she was a doctor, and made, at that time, she was just getting her practice started, made 150, 200 grand, and thought, whoa, this is great. And she would go on these long trips, very extravagant. And she said, well, you only live once. But now it's 20 something years later, and she's getting ready to, she's in her 60s, and you want to chill, and she doesn't have a big nest egg. And I think that's one thing that we could all take away from that, where you are today is not where you are going to be 20, 30, 40 years from now. And you might be here until your 80s or 90s. And do you have enough to keep you going and to have the lifestyle you want, not just keep you going where you just can eat and maybe just have a little roof over your head, but really have a life that you can enjoy?
Right. And that's a good point what you make there, because what your story illustrates is that there's just a lack of planning and also a lack of knowledge. And I've seen this firsthand. So we see, even at the hospitals, you see doctors that are in their 70s and 80s and they're still working. And you kind of scratch your head and wondering why they have to work full time, 60, 70 hours a week still. You figure they at least get some passive income by then to at least go part-time or something. So, as I dug into it, I found out a couple reasons why this is the case. And surprisingly, is not just with physicians. It's actually a mind state with a majority of people. It's hard to actually sit down and plan out, make a budget and plan out your financial future, and then have the commitment to save and then the knowledge to invest intelligently. And there's no school for this. So, I mean, if you want to become a doctor, hey, you know the pathway, go to college, then go to med school, and there's people that teach you every day how to do it. But what we just talked about, being financially successful and actually gaining wealth, there's no course for that. You can't go to school and major in wealth. So you kind of have to learn this almost on the streets. And so kind of that's what my book was about. Everything I learned from my multimillionaire mentors and advisors and private equity people, and some of it just from experience. I put it all into a book so people at least have a primer and at least see what type of things they should be thinking about if they're trying to plan for their financial future. My book's a little bit more focused on physicians, but the knowledge can be applicable to anybody. So the book is really for anybody. There's just a couple of chapters on physician situations in there that are specific to them.
Yeah. Well, this is fascinating because I remember one of the shows I really liked watching when I had a TV, which was years ago now, but was the flipping of houses. And I forgot the name of it. Maybe it was flipping houses or whatever. But I liked the idea of normal, ordinary people buying a house, flipping it, and making money. But what I found very interesting, Amir, is that people would buy houses and they would flip them or try to flip them, but they would go and buy all this furniture that was their taste. And, I want to get it just perfect the way I want my house. I'm like, dude, this isn't your house. You're going to sell it. And the whole point is to make a profit from it so you can invest it again or save it or whatever. And they were getting emotionally invested as if it was their house. And I mean, I don't know how you work real estate, if you flip houses or if you buy them and just, how do you do real estate? Do you do flipping? How does it work for you? And how have you built your empire?
Well, we do a couple things. The majority of our income comes from flipping houses, actually. And we also build turnkey rentals for people that don't want to get emotionally involved. We'll do everything for them and put a tenant in there and screen it, have them sign a 2-year contract. And from day one, they're making money. They don't have to do anything. All the repairs have already been done. We also, for larger investors, will pool anywhere from $500,000 to maybe $2 or $3 million. And we'll purchase, it could be an apartment complex, it could be a retail strip, but larger deals that they wouldn't have access to otherwise, we put together the pieces of the puzzle so everybody can own a little ownership in a larger project that gets better returns. But what you mentioned about the fix and flip shows is kind of interesting. We see the same thing, and you mentioned the word emotion. One thing I mentioned in my book is that you really had to take emotion out of the equation. So, and a lot of people, they feel like however they're going to design the house, that's what they like is what everybody else is going to like. But really, it's such a complex science. About 70% of people will either fail or break even on their first flip. I mean, mainly because of the reasons you just talked about. But you had to design the product to match the demographic that's buying in that neighborhood. If you like to have marble floors in the kitchen, you can't go to, a rundown neighborhood where you found a fixer-upper and then put marble floors. You just can't do that. It's not going to work. Yeah. So you have to budget everything and make sure you come under budget. And it's not an easy thing to do. And for sure, people are getting emotionally involved. They're going to get burned on it. And usually they come to one of our real estate courses, which we do every Thursday, and they ask us for help. And then usually we end up taking over the project and try to get them out of the deal or partner with them on wherever they're having headaches.
Yeah. And this reminds me also, another show, of course, I can't remember the name of it, where there would be a poor family in need, and the show would come in and design or redesign their house to amazing specifications where it would be like a dream house, the paradise house. And I often thought watching it, well, they're kind of in a crappy area, and they've just made like a $2 million house in a crappy area. How are they ever going to get rid of that house now? They're definitely not going to get what is put into it.
Yeah, I know what show you're talking about. I can't think of the name, but I always wonder that too. In the meantime, if they're going to live there for a long time, that's great. But one thing I tell investors too is a lot of times the best investment is the cheapest house in the most expensive neighborhood. If you're the most expensive house in a cheaper neighborhood, you're actually just helping everybody else. You're just bringing up their comps. So,
yeah, I didn't think of that. It's true. And of course, I always thought, looking at it, if you're in a not such good area, you could actually tempt them to have robberies and go like, hey, I want what my neighbor got over there.
you got to be careful that. Put up some security cameras too after that show.
I know. Wow. But now tell me, for anyone wanting to get started, a lot of people will call in to me say, hey, I want to build other streams of income. And I'm thinking, hey, besides my business and this other business I have going on, I'd like to maybe do real estate. But they're like, where do you even start? And how much money do I put down? What do you tell people who want to get started, but they don't know even where to start, how to invest? Where do they begin?
Okay. Well, actually, that's a great question, because when people reach us on our website and ask that question, we usually have a 1 to 2 hour call with them, or they meet us at our office, and we'll talk about all the options. So we can actually have 5 podcasts actually just on that.
Wow.
I'll make it a little bit brief, because I know we don't have hours. When I talk to somebody, I got to look at what their priorities are. And the things we talk about is, first, how much money do they have to invest? How much experience do they have? What's their timeline? What are their financial goals? And what kind of skill sets do they have? So, for example, let's say, there's some people that are trying to get into it part-time. They don't have all the time to dedicate to it. And they also don't have very much money. I have a lot of people that are actually, 21, 22 years old coming out here. And what I advise to them is, you can be a wholesaler. So what does a wholesaler do? They'll go out and they'll find the properties. They'll knock on doors. They'll try to find the owner of these rundown homes, and they'll put an offer on it on behalf of somebody who does fix and flips like myself and my brother. Mm-hmm. So if they find a deal, let's say if they find, $150,000 house for $100,000, they get under contract, we'll give them a $5,000 to $10,000 fee for wholesaling it to us, which means they put it under contract and they immediately turn the contract over to us. So that in that case, you don't have a lot of money, but you have some time. You're trading your time for the money, but you're still investing in real estate. You're just putting in your sweat.
Wow.
So the next progression is from that, let's say you got a little bit of money. So if you get a little bit of money, what I suggest is, a little bit might be, enough of a down payment, 20% down payment on a home. Mm-hmm. So you could buy a turnkey rental. And so what we would do for them is we would find an area where rents are going up almost exponentially. And there are plenty of areas around Dallas where that's happening. Mm-hmm. We'll rehab a house and sell it to them with a tenant in it. And they put 20% down. And from day one, their cash on cash return will probably be at least 10 or 11%. And their overall return, which is called internal rate of return, this is the appreciation, the tax benefits, the cash flow, the pay down of the capital, since the renter is paying down the capital. You add all that up, they're usually going to hit 20 to 25% annualized return if they're holding this for 5 to 10 years. And I don't know of too many investments out there that can do that safely.
We'll be back after these messages.
Think back to when you started your business. You had a dream. You had boundless passion. You wanted to create something different. There was a problem, and you were going to solve it. Being an independent retailer is rewarding, but challenging, and there's a lot more to it than you ever imagined. Well, Lightspeed is here to help. With 45,000 customers around the world, we've helped countless entrepreneurs nail the business side of retail so they can spend time doing what they're passionate about. Join us for a 6-week speaker series featuring a curated panel of experts that will answer some of retail's toughest questions and give you the edge you need to stay competitive. You have a passion, and we have a passion for technology inspired by you. Visit lightspeedhq.com/speaker-series to learn more.
That's a great option. Let's say somebody has a little bit of money, but they don't have 20% down. Mm-hmm. I would actually recommend just buying a home and living in it for a little bit of time and put 3.5% down. And if anybody wants to know how to get in with $0, let me know. You could call me later. That's a whole other issue or a whole other topic.
I'll be calling you on that one.
No, I'll show you how to do it for 0 to about 3.5% down. You can get into a home, but then later on, go find another one to live in or rent from an apartment or something and immediately start renting out the home you just bought. Now you're in, however size house, 100, 200, 300,000, depending on where you're living. And you got a renter in there and they're paying off your mortgage and you're getting a little bit of cash flow, then go do it again. And you could probably do that about once every year or two. So and now you get up to larger investors. Some people want to invest $500,000. I've got one guy that wants to invest $1.7 million with me. So it's hard to place that in a lot of residential homes. So that's why we have our commercial arm. So for somebody like that, we're going to do a large commercial real estate development. We might take down some land and build a retail strip, or we might find an apartment complex that might be managed incorrectly, or maybe the rents are below market, and we're going to buy that place and we're going to fix the management, decrease expenses, and increase the rent. And they'll probably get about 10 to 15% return on their money like that. And if they don't have enough to take down an apartment complex themselves, then that's when the syndication comes in. And my website, Funding Nest, they could pool their money with other investors on there, and they could buy small shares of a company that's owning the apartment complex. So that's how you kind of go from having no money and a little bit of time to having a lot of money and no time, and the different type of avenues you could go in to invest in real estate.
So, wow. So it looks to me like there's many different avenues, and whether it be a little money or a little time or more time, there's different options for you to choose depending on where you're at the moment.
Yes, anybody can get involved in real estate. It's just, people don't know how to do it. So that's why the first consultation is about 1 to 2 hours. We find out what's best for them.
I love that. And now I've heard people, and I had a friend mention how they were doing the residential houses. Now, the thing that I heard about hearing the story from them is the horrors of trying to find good tenants. And I thought, wow, it just seems like I don't want to deal with that. And I'm being tenants, meaning residential areas and residential apartments. And it seemed like, if you weren't really good at screening people, you could end up getting tenants that weren't going to pay or even had the money but weren't keeping up on their payments, or you have to chase them down, bring them to court, and it just seems like a big headache. Is one better or another, working more in the commercial area arm as opposed to rental, or is it just knowing the facts and what to look for that makes all the difference?
It's a little bit of both. I'll talk about the residential side first, and then I'll talk about the commercial. So on the residential side, when you screen a tenant, a lot of people that are just doing 1 or 2 rentals, they probably don't have, they might not have the time or money to invest in all the background screening tools that we use. We have the same type of tools that collection agencies use, so we can do background checks on everybody and screen them. And for certain neighborhoods, also, we know what are the best tenants. For example, if we have a rental near a school district, we definitely want to look for a family that has a kid that's about going to go to that school, and they'll be there as a long-term tenant for maybe 10 years. So we definitely have to pick the ideal tenant based on where that rental home is. And that just takes some experience, and it's really localized knowledge that an outside investor is not going to have usually.
Wow.
But, there are headaches. I mean, even with this, we've had to evict people from even our own rental property. We have people that don't want to pay rent, or their jobs changed, or something happens. And that's just part of the process. It's very difficult to do a real estate with tenants and not run into that problem over years. It's just going to happen. So if somebody feels like they're up to dealing with it on their own, that's fine. If not, I would just recommend getting a management team and paying them anywhere from 7 to 10% of the gross rent. And then you factor that into your cash flow from day one, but at least you don't have the headaches. So you can always exchange headaches for less cash flow. If you don't want headaches, pay the management team. If you want to make a little bit more money and you have the time to give to running it and dealing with the headaches, then then you could do that as well. So it's really up to the investor and what their priorities are and how much headaches they want to deal with.
How much headaches.
Right.
Now, would you say, is there a certain time limit that if you start to notice a problem? Because actually, here's the interesting thing. I've worked in accounts receivable, and that's exactly what I do as a financial consultant, is I work with businesses, small businesses, medium businesses, super large businesses, looking at their cash flow, what's wrong with their receivables. If they have a good large receivables, anything over, 10%, that should not be. What's going on here? So that's been my expertise. And I often find business owners as well as just ordinary folks not realizing that the money coming in is just as important, if not more important, about money going out. They're both, you got to look at both sides of the ledger. But so from this perspective, as you're going to become a real estate a renter and such, what is to pay attention to, when do you decide that I need to take this to the next level, that, they've missed it a month or two, or they've always been a good tenant? How do you do that for yourself?
Well, going into the property, you want to prepare for that. So a couple things we do is, besides the tenant screening, we also buffer it by getting 1 or 2 months rent up front. So if there are any damages or they miss a month, guess what? We have about 2 months rent in deposit. So the more difficult it looks like the tenant is when they're coming in, the larger deposit you're going to want to have, and the tighter control you're going to want to have on them. So that's pretty much what it is. If it's a great tenant, some places will not even have you make a deposit. So you can actually, based on the risk of the tenant coming in, you can kind of decide how much money you want up front to buffer those headaches. Another thing too is, you had mentioned, when do these problems happen? Well, most of the problems happen within the first 6 months, or actually the first 3 months. So if you have a tenant in there and they're not complaining after 3 to 6 months, you're pretty much on cruise control. So after we noticed that from our own rental portfolio, when we created our turnkey rental program, when we rehab the property and put in a tenant, we do free property management for the first 6 months. So if the first 6 months go clear and they're not paying for property management, then we give that investor the option. Do you want us to keep managing the property? That's when we start charging a fee. Or, they can do it on their own if they feel like there's not going to be any headaches. But at least they always have that option. If the headaches come in, they can always give us a call, and we'll throw management in there and clean up the issue.
I love this. This is great. And now you were going to talk on the other side of the coin on dealing with commercial property. Is there a big difference to dealing with commercial tenants as opposed to rental tenants?
Yes. So in commercial property, we had to break up commercial property into different asset classes. You have hospitality, which would be like hotel. You have multifamily, which is apartment complex. You have retail, so like the retail strips that you see, or like a mall or something like that. And then you have industrial, which would be a warehouse. It just happened, an office also. It could be medical office or corporate office. Now, excluding multifamily, most of those renters or tenants do what's called triple net leases. That means not only do they pay you rent, but they also are paying for electricity and the taxes and everything like that. It truly is turnkey. Wow. And not only that, but a lot of times their contracts are for 5 to 10 years. Sometimes you can get 20 years. So imagine a large corporation is going to be your tenant, and they plan on being in business for 20 years, and you have steady rent coming in from a high credit tenant. It could be, a grocery anchor store. It could be a franchise like a Subway, and they are agreeing to pay 20 years. So You're pretty much not going to have any headaches, and any fixes or repairs that are on the inside of the building, they're responsible for it, not you. So that's kind of part of the appeal with doing commercial real estate is you have fewer headaches like that. The tenant themselves has to deal with a lot of it. The owner of the property really has to deal with the outside. That mainly is commercial real estate outside of apartment complexes.
Now, it seems to me, just hearing this, that it would seem like the better bet going towards commercial real estate. But I'm guessing it costs, or there's more costs involved, and it's more capital you have to put down. Am I correct?
That's right. It is a little bit more capital intensive. Most of these commercial deals will be over $1 million. So it's not easy for just anybody to get in. The returns might not be as high either, because when you have, the better the tenants you have, the the more they're going to negotiate on their rental rate. So let's say if a Starbucks comes by, I mean, you might not be able to charge as much rent for the Starbucks because Starbucks has such good credit. It's almost like, imagine if you have good credit and you're going to the bank for a loan.
Yeah.
So the better credit you have, the less the bank is going to charge you to bank with them. It's the same thing when you do commercial real estate. The lower the risk is and the better the credit is of that tenant, the more they can negotiate on the rent. But also when you get that tenant in there, the more valuable it is when you sell it. So there are people out there that love these stabilized deals, and they'll pay a higher amount for that commercial project that you developed or that you purchased because it's so less risk. So people are willing to pay more to get, and you know, inversely, they're going to get a lower return, but they're okay. The reason they're getting lower return is because there's lower risk because you have a better tenant. So you can kind of decide based on your risk tolerance. This is like one of the things we talk about when people come in for a consultation. We try to see what their risk tolerance is. Let's say if they're okay with 7 or 8%, I'd probably put them in a very secure, stabilized deal, no headaches. Let's say if they're trying to grow their net worth and their nest egg and they're younger with a little bit more comfort with risk, we might put them into a deal with not the best tenants, but a little bit more headaches possibly, but they're going to make a little bit more. They might creep up into like 10, 11, 12% return range if they're willing to take on that little bit more risk.
Is there a certain amount of risk you advise people to take if at certain areas, at certain times of growing their business? Maybe they're brand new, so you maybe would advise less risk. How does it work when you work with people?
Yeah, you know, a lot of times if it's their first time and they've never done it before, I suggest that they do a couple small deals with us where really I'm taking on the risk and they're a passive investor. So usually in those cases, I sign for the note. I'm on the hook for everything, and they can just put in a little bit of equity, and my brother and I will run the show. And our deals we try to do deals that are extremely safe, which is why we've never lost capital for any investors. And so that would be the first deal that we would do. They had to partner with us to make very safe returns. And they'll probably hit around 9 to 15% annualized return by doing that. And if they graduate to the next level, if they want to take on some more risk and do a deal on themselves, that's when we're just going to be here as a consultant and kind of guide them there, or our brokerage would come into play and we'll do a lot of the screening and the due diligence for them. And we just represent them as the broker, and then they could buy their own either residential project or they could buy their own commercial project.
Wow, this is really great news for people out there who've always thought, "Hey, I love the idea of it, but I don't think it's for me." Now, if they want to start working with you guys and do any of the different aspects you talked about, maybe even just finding a little bit more about that, how could they do that?
Well, they could reach me on my website, baluchbulletin.com. That's a great place to get started. That website actually has links to all the other websites we have, which is our brokerage website and our crowdfunding website. And they just drop me an email there. If they want to add me on LinkedIn, they could just go to Amir Baluch on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only one on there. I think I'll at least be the only doctor that has the name Amir Baluch, so I should be pretty easy to find. And if they want to get a little something special, have for all the listeners out there on your show, if you go to baluchbulletin.com/savvy, there's going to be a special bonus gift for anybody that wants to download it, and that'll be available shortly after this podcast.
Well, thank you so much. That is such a wonderful gift. And I know this is going to help a lot of business owners and people listening in who've decided, hey, I want to grow that nest egg. I don't want to come time to retirement and sit here having to go to Dunkin' Donuts once a month when I get my Social Security check. That's not how we want to be living in life. So I want to thank you again for sharing your great knowledge and gifts today on Savvy Business Radio.
Thanks for having me.
After 5 years of creating exciting business content with amazing businesses from around the world, Savvy is now creating a new video series entitled Heartbeat of the World. This series will feature experts from around the globe. We will highlight and discuss some of the greatest challenges facing the U.S. and the world. Co-create with us and find out more at bit.ly/SavvyPatron.
Savvy Business Radio runs in syndication on 8 AM/FM stations nationwide, including iHeartRadio and 6 podcasting platforms. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or to become a guest and find out how we can help you get your message out in a bigger way, call 732-474-7375 or email Christina@savvybusinessradio.com.